Darkness, silence, pain. Daniel felt like he was floating, but his body ached as if he had been crushed. His mind was foggy, his breathing slow. He tried to remember what had happened, but everything was a blur. Then, suddenly, light. A soft hum filled the air, and Daniel's eyes slowly opened. He was lying on a smooth metallic surface, dim blue lights glowing above him. The air smelled clean, artificial. This wasn't his ship. Panic shot through him. He tried to sit up, but sharp pain tore through his ribs. He gritted his teeth and groaned. "You are awake." The voice was calm but unfamiliar. Daniel turned his head and saw someone standing nearby. She was tall, almost 7 feet, with silver blue skin that shimmered under the lights. Her dark violet eyes watched him closely, and her long flowing hair moved slightly, as if caught in an invisible breeze. An alien. Daniel's heart pounded. He had seen aliens before, traitors, diplomats, even enemies, but none like her. He swallowed hard. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice rough. "You are safe," she said simply. "I saved you." Daniel blinked. His last memory came rushing back. His ship had been under attack. Flames, alarms, the pressure of space tearing his vessel apart. He had been losing oxygen, floating into nothingness. He should be dead. "You saved me?" he asked, still trying to make sense of it. "Yes." She stepped closer, her movements smooth and controlled. "Your ship was destroyed. You were moments from death." Daniel exhaled slowly, his head still spinning. "And why did you save me?" The alien woman tilted her head slightly. "Because now, you must come with me." Her voice was firm, as if the matter was already decided. Daniel frowned. "Come with you. Where?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pressed a button on a floating console, and a screen appeared, displaying a star map. Daniel didn't recognize the coordinates. "You have a life debt," she said finally. "In my culture, when one life is saved, it belongs to the one who saved it. You are now bound to me." Daniel stared at her. He wasn't sure if he had misheard. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice rising. "You think you own me now?" She didn't react to his anger. "It is the law of my people." Daniel forced himself to sit up despite the pain. "Listen, lady, I appreciate the rescue, but I don't belong to anyone. I'm a free man." She met his gaze. "You misunderstand. This is not about ownership. It is about duty. You owe me your life, and so you must travel with me until the debt is repaid." Daniel shook his head. "That's not how humans work." "Perhaps not," she said calmly, "but you are no longer among humans." The realization hit him harder than he expected. He had no ship, no way home. He didn't even know where he was. For all he knew, this alien woman was the only thing keeping him alive. He took a deep breath. "All right. What's your name?" "I am Vela," she said, "a warrior of the Xilari." Daniel narrowed his eyes. He had heard of the Xilari before. Once they had been a strong warrior race, but something had changed. They had disappeared from major conflicts, fading into the background of galactic politics. No one knew why. "If you're a warrior," Daniel said carefully, "then why did you save me?" Vela hesitated for the first time. "Because you are human." Daniel frowned. "What does that have to do with anything?" Before she could answer, alarms blared across the ship. A robotic voice spoke in a language Daniel didn't understand, but the flashing red lights were universal. "We are being hunted," Vela said. "Hunted? By who?" "The Kordath," she answered, eyes darkening. "And they want you more than anything." Daniel's breath caught. He didn't know who the Kordath were, but he could tell one thing. This wasn't just a simple rescue. He was in serious trouble. Red lights flashed across the sleek metallic walls as the alarm echoed through the ship. Daniel pushed himself upright, ignoring the pain in his ribs. His heart pounded. "Hunted," he repeated. "By who?" Vela moved to the control panel, her fingers gliding over glowing symbols. "The Kordath," she said. "They are dangerous, and they are after you." Daniel scowled. "Why would an alien species be after me?" Vela's violet eyes flickered toward him. "Because you are human." Daniel exhaled sharply. That wasn't an answer. It was just more mystery. But before he could push for more, the ship shuddered violently. "We are being targeted," Vela said. She tapped a button, and a large screen in front of them lit up. Outside, the deep black of space stretched endlessly, but in the distance, 3 dark, claw-shaped ships were closing in fast. Daniel clenched his jaw. He had seen enough battles to know when he was outmatched. "Can we outrun them?" Vela didn't look away from the screen. "Not for long. Their ships are faster." Daniel forced himself to stand, steadying himself against the console. "Then we need another plan." Vela's fingers moved quickly over the controls, and the ship's engines roared louder. "Hold on," she warned. The ship lurched forward with a sudden burst of speed, throwing Daniel against the wall. He gritted his teeth and grabbed onto a metal bar for support. Through the screen, he watched the Kordath ships shift formation, adjusting to match their movements. "They're gaining," he said. "I know," Vela replied. The Kordath ships opened fire. Blazing blue energy bolts shot across the darkness, barely missing their vessel. One blast struck the rear shields, shaking the ship violently. "Shields at 60%, Vela said. Daniel took a deep breath, forcing his mind to focus. He had been in tough situations before, trapped behind enemy lines, outnumbered, outgunned, and every time he had survived by thinking differently. "Can you fly manual?" he asked. Vela glanced at him. "Why?" "Because their formation is too perfect. They're expecting you to fly like a computer. If you fly like a human, you might throw them off." Vela hesitated, then switched the ship to manual control. Instantly, the movements became rougher, less precise, but also more unpredictable. She dove the ship downward, spun sharply, and then pulled up in a way no autopilot would ever attempt. The Kordath ships hesitated for just a moment. "There. That confused them," Daniel said. "Now head for that asteroid field." Vela frowned. "That is reckless." Daniel smirked. "Exactly. They won't expect it." Vela didn't argue. She steered the ship toward the massive cluster of floating rocks. The Kordath ships hesitated again before following. Daniel's eyes stayed on the screen. The asteroids were spinning chaotically, colliding into each other with deadly force. One wrong move, and they'd be crushed. "Stay close to the biggest ones," he advised. "Use them for cover." Vela maneuvered the ship between the asteroids, weaving through the debris with sharp, sudden movements. The Kordath ships followed, but their sleek designs worked against them. They were too fast, too rigid. One of the enemy ships clipped an asteroid, spinning out of control before crashing into a massive rock. It exploded in a bright fireball. Daniel grinned. One down. The other 2 ships adjusted their tactics, becoming more cautious. "They are learning," Vela muttered. Daniel's mind raced. "Then let's teach them a final lesson." "Do we have weapons?" "Minimal," Vela admitted. Daniel pointed to a massive asteroid ahead. "Fly straight at that rock." Vela's eyes widened. "Are you insane?" "Trust me," Daniel said. For a second, she didn't move. Then she pushed the controls forward. The ship surged ahead, heading straight for the asteroid. The Kordath ships followed, thinking they had cornered them. "Now, pull up at the last second," Daniel ordered. Vela obeyed, yanking the controls. The ship skimmed just above the asteroid's surface, narrowly avoiding disaster. But the Kordath ships were moving too fast. One of them tried to pull up but smashed into the rock, exploding on impact. The last Kordath ship veered off, retreating. Daniel exhaled. Looks like they weren't ready for human tactics. Vela turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You are reckless, but effective." Daniel grinned. Welcome to humanity. The alarms faded, and the ship flew into open space once more. But Daniel knew this wasn't over. The Kordath wouldn't give up so easily, and he still didn't know why they wanted him so badly. For now, though, they had survived. The ship drifted silently through space, the distant stars shining like tiny beacons in the void. The alarms had stopped, but tension still filled the air. Daniel leaned against the cold metal wall, catching his breath. His ribs still ached, but he ignored the pain. Vela sat at the control panel, her violet eyes scanning the screens. "The Kordath ship has retreated," she said. "For now." Daniel crossed his arms. "They'll be back." Vela didn't argue. Instead, she pressed a few buttons, and a star map appeared on the screen. Daniel studied it, but the coordinates meant nothing to him. "Where are we going?" he asked. Vela hesitated. "A safe place." Daniel frowned. "Safe for who?" "Because right now, I don't feel very safe." Vela turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You should not be alive, Daniel." Daniel's stomach tightened. "Yeah, well, I've been told that before." Vela shook her head. "Not like this. The Kordath should have killed you back there. But they didn't." Daniel frowned. "Because we outsmarted them." Vela leaned forward. "No, because they weren't trying to destroy you. They were trying to capture you." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Why?" Vela was silent for a long moment. Then, she stood and walked over to a small compartment in the wall. She pressed a hidden button, and the panel slid open, revealing a glowing blue data tablet. She picked it up and handed it to Daniel. He hesitated before taking it. The screen flickered to life, showing strange symbols and images. One of them was a human figure, his figure. His name was written in an alien language he didn't understand, but there was no mistaking it. Daniel's breath caught. "What is this?" "A bounty," Vela said. Daniel stared at her. "You're saying the Kordath put a price on my head?" "Yes," she said, "and it is higher than any bounty I have ever seen." Daniel felt a cold sensation creeping up his spine. He had been in dangerous situations before, but this was different. He wasn't just a target, he was valuable. He looked back at the screen. "Why? What do they want with me?" Vela's expression darkened. "Because you are human." Daniel let out a frustrated sigh. "You keep saying that like it explains everything. What does it mean?" Vela studied him for a moment before answering. "Humans are unpredictable." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "That's not exactly news." Vela shook her head. "No, you do not understand. The Kordath have fought many species. They have conquered and destroyed worlds. But when they encountered humans, they found something they had never faced before." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "And what's that?" Vela's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "Defiance." Daniel blinked. "Defiance?" "Yes," Vela said. "Other species, when faced with Kordath power, submit. They surrender or they run. But humans fight. Even when the battle is hopeless. Even when there is no chance of survival." Daniel smirked. "Yeah, that sounds about right." Vela nodded. "The Kordath do not understand it, and what they do not understand, they fear. They believe humans have something. Some secret, some ability, that makes them different." Daniel shook his head. "There's no secret. We just don't like being told what to do." Vela gave him a sharp look. "Perhaps, but they are determined to find out why. That is why they want you alive." Daniel clenched his fists. He had faced enemies before, but this was something else. A whole species hunting him down just because of what he was. "So," he said, "what happens if they catch me?" Vela's expression darkened. "They will experiment on you. Study you, and if they find what they are looking for," she hesitated, "they will use it to break humanity." A cold chill ran through Daniel's body. This wasn't just about him. If the Kordath found a way to control or suppress humanity's defiant nature, they could win every future battle. "They won't get that chance," Daniel said firmly. Vela studied him. You are certain? Daniel met her gaze. 100%. For the first time, something like respect flickered in Vela's eyes. She turned back to the controls. Then we must move quickly. I have a plan. Daniel crossed his arms. I'm listening. Vela glanced at him. There is someone who can help us, but it will not be easy. Daniel smirked. Nothing ever is. The ship's engines roared to life, and they vanished into the stars. The ship moved swiftly through the darkness of space, its engines humming softly. Daniel sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring at the endless stars ahead. His mind was still racing. A bounty on his head, the Kordath hunting him. And now, Vela had a plan that involved someone else. He turned to her. So, who is this person we're meeting? Vela kept her eyes on the controls. His name is Orcs. He is difficult. Daniel frowned. Difficult how? Vela hesitated before answering. He is a former Silari warrior, like me. But unlike me, he has no honor. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That's not exactly comforting. Vela sighed. Orcs has information. He knows the Kordath's movements, their weaknesses. If we want to survive, we need his help. Daniel leaned back in his seat. He didn't like it. Trusting someone with no honor was a gamble. But right now, they didn't have many choices. The ship's console beeped. We are approaching the meeting point, Vela said. Daniel glanced at the screen. A small rocky moon floated ahead, its surface covered in jagged cliffs and deep craters. It looked like the kind of place people went to disappear. As they descended, Daniel spotted a structure built into the rocks. A hidden outpost. Orcs is inside, Vela said. The ship landed with a soft thud. The airlock hissed as the ramp lowered, revealing the dusty, gray ground. Daniel followed Vela out, scanning the area. The place felt abandoned, lifeless, but he knew better than to trust appearances. They reached the entrance, a large metal door, rusted at the edges. Vela pressed a button on the side panel. A moment later, a crackling voice answered. You shouldn't have come here, Vela. Daniel tensed. The voice was deep, rough. We need to talk, Vela said firmly. The door slid open. Inside, the dimly lit room smelled of metal and oil. Weapons and armor lined the walls, and in the center stood a figure. Orcs. He was taller than Vela, his silver-blue skin marked with scars. His piercing yellow eyes studied them carefully. His gaze settled on Daniel. So, the famous human. Daniel crossed his arms. Didn't know I was famous. Orcs chuckled. The Kordath are looking for you everywhere. And where the Kordath go, trouble follows. We need information, Vela said. Orcs smirked. Of course you do. He leaned against a table, but information has a price. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Let me guess. You want money. Orcs laughed. Money? No, human. I want something much more valuable. Vela stiffened. Orcs. Orcs raised a hand. Relax, warrior. It is a simple request. I want a favor. Daniel exchanged a look with Vela. He had dealt with people like this before. People who traded in secrets, always playing both sides. What kind of favor? Daniel asked. Orcs grinned. There is a cargo ship arriving in this sector soon. It carries something important to me. I need you to retrieve it. Vela's eyes darkened. You want us to steal for you? Orcs shrugged. Call it what you like. Do this, and I will give you what you need. Daniel sighed. And if we refuse? Orcs' smile faded. Then you leave here with nothing. And the Kordath will find you soon enough. Daniel clenched his jaw. He hated being forced into bad deals. But Orcs was right. They had no other leads. Vela turned to Daniel. It is your choice. Daniel exhaled slowly. Fine. We'll get your cargo. Orcs' grin returned. Good. Then we have an agreement. As they left the outpost, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they had just made a deal with the devil. And soon, they would find out if it was worth it. Daniel sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring at the approaching cargo ship on the screen. It was a massive transport vessel, its gray metallic hull reflecting the dim light of a nearby star. The ship moved slowly, unaware of the danger coming its way. He turned to Vela. "So, what exactly are we stealing?" Vela's fingers moved across the controls as she scanned the cargo ship. Orcs didn't say. But if he wants it this badly, it must be valuable. Daniel frowned. He didn't like working blind. Back on Earth, he had been in plenty of dangerous situations, but at least he always knew what he was dealing with. Now he was about to break into an alien ship for something mysterious, just to buy the trust of a warrior he barely knew. He sighed. "All right. How do we do this?" Vela pointed at the screen. "The ship's defenses are weak. It is a transport, not a warship. We can dock onto one of the side airlocks. But once inside, we must be quick." Daniel nodded. "Then let's not waste time." Vela guided their ship toward the cargo vessel, keeping their movements slow and controlled. Within moments, they latched onto the transport's airlock. A faint hiss filled the cabin as their ship connected to the larger one. Daniel grabbed his weapon, a compact energy pistol, and followed Vela to the airlock door. The light above the entrance turned green. "Ready?" Vela asked. Daniel smirked. Too late to back out now. The door slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor inside the transport ship. The air smelled of metal and fuel. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Daniel moved cautiously, his weapon raised. "You sure no one's here?" Vela's eyes scanned the hallway. "There should only be a small crew, but we must be careful." They advanced through the corridors, their footsteps light against the cold metal floor. Vela led the way, checking every corner before moving forward. After a few minutes, they reached a large storage room. Crates of supplies were stacked high, some labeled in alien symbols Daniel couldn't read. Vela pulled out a small device and scanned the area. "The cargo we need is in that crate," she said, pointing to a large container near the center of the room. Daniel walked over and placed his hands on the container. "What's inside?" Vela tapped on her scanner. A small screen flashed with unreadable text. Then her eyes widened slightly. "This is strange," she muttered. Daniel frowned. "What?" Vela hesitated. "This container is locked with a high-level security code. This is not just some stolen goods. It is something important." Daniel sighed. "Of course it is. Nothing is ever easy." Vela knelt beside the crate, her fingers moving over the lock mechanism. She pulled out a small tool and started bypassing the security system. Daniel stood guard, his ears straining for any sound. The transport ship was still eerily silent. Then footsteps. Daniel's grip tightened on his weapon. "We got company." Vela didn't look up. "Stall them. I need more time." Daniel took a deep breath and moved toward the entrance. The footsteps were getting closer. A shadow appeared in the hallway, and then a figure stepped into view. It was a Kordath soldier. Daniel's heart pounded. What was a Kordath doing on a simple cargo ship? The alien warrior spotted him and immediately reached for his weapon. Daniel didn't hesitate. He fired first. A bright blue energy blast struck the Kordath in the chest, sending him crashing to the floor. An alarm blared through the ship. Vela cursed. "That's not good." Daniel ran back to her. "Please tell me you're almost done." The lock on the crate clicked open. Vela quickly lifted the lid, and then froze. Daniel peered inside. His breath caught. Inside the crate was a metal pod, and inside the pod was a human. Daniel's mind raced. "What the?" Vela shook her head. "This is not what I expected." Daniel clenched his fists. Orcs knew. That's why he didn't tell us. The alarm continued blaring. More footsteps echoed in the hallway. Vela looked at him. "What do we do?" Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon. We fight our way out, and we take him with us. Because whatever was happening here, one thing was clear. This just became personal. Alarms screamed through the cargo ship, flashing red lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. Daniel's pulse raced as he stared at the pod's occupant, a human man, unconscious, suspended in some kind of stasis. "We don't have time for questions," Daniel said, gripping his weapon. "We take him and get out of here." Vela nodded and pressed a button on the pod's side. The transparent cover hissed open, releasing a thin mist. The man inside didn't move. His skin was pale, and his short dark hair clung to his forehead. Daniel reached in and pulled him out. The man was lighter than expected, but completely limp. "He's breathing," Daniel confirmed. "We'll figure out the rest later." Heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. More Kordath soldiers were coming. Vela grabbed her rifle. "We have to move. Now." Daniel hoisted the unconscious man over his shoulder. "Lead the way." Vela took point, moving swiftly through the storage room. The moment they stepped into the hallway, 3 Kordath warriors appeared at the far end. "There they are," one shouted in a guttural voice. Daniel barely had time to react before the Kordath opened fire. Bright red energy bolts streaked toward them. "Move," Vela shouted, diving behind a crate for cover. Daniel ducked behind another crate, shielding the unconscious man as blasts struck the walls around them. "We're running out of options." Vela peeked out and fired a precise shot, hitting one of the Kordath in the chest. The warrior collapsed with a grunt. The other 2 ducked for cover. "We need to get to the ship," Vela said. "There's a shortcut through the ventilation system." Daniel glanced at the vent cover near the floor. It was small, but they could squeeze through. "You go first," he said. Vela shot another round to keep the Kordath back, then kicked open the vent. She slid inside quickly, her rifle still in her hands. Daniel lifted the unconscious man and pushed him into the vent. The space was tight, and the man's body barely fit, but Daniel managed to shove him through. More Kordath soldiers arrived, their voices growing louder. "No time," Daniel muttered, then crawled into the vent himself, pulling the cover back into place behind him. The vent was dark and narrow, the metal cold against his hands and knees. Ahead, Vela moved swiftly, leading the way. "Almost there," she whispered. They reached the exit, a grate that opened near the docking bay. Vela kicked it open and slid out first, her rifle ready. Daniel followed, dragging the unconscious man out with him. The docking bay was just ahead. Their ship stood waiting, the ramp still down. But between them and escape stood 4 more Kordath warriors. One of them, larger than the others, stepped forward. His black armor gleamed under the dim lighting. He was different from the others, stronger, more experienced. "You cannot run forever," the warrior said. Daniel set the unconscious man down carefully. Then he stood up, gripping his pistol, not planning to run. The Kordath warrior smirked. "Good." Without warning, he lunged. Daniel dodged just in time, rolling to the side as the warrior's massive fist crashed into the floor, leaving a dent in the metal. Vela fired her rifle, striking one of the other Kordath in the shoulder. The warrior stumbled back, growling in pain. Daniel aimed his pistol at the leader and fired, but the warrior was fast. He dodged and swung his heavy fist again. This time, it connected. Pain exploded in Daniel's ribs as he was thrown backward, hitting the ground hard. Vela shouted something, but Daniel's ears were ringing. He tasted blood in his mouth. The Kordath leader stood over him, raising his weapon for the final strike. Then, suddenly, a hand grabbed the warrior's arm. The unconscious man was awake. His grip tightened around the Kordath's wrist, and for the first time, the warrior looked surprised. The man's eyes opened, deep, glowing blue. With a sudden burst of strength, he twisted the warrior's arm and threw him to the ground with unnatural force. The other Kordath hesitated, shock in their eyes. Vela didn't waste the moment. She fired, taking down another enemy. Daniel, still gasping for air, grabbed his pistol and fired two, hitting the third Kordath in the leg. The leader, now struggling to his feet, locked eyes with the mysterious man. "You!" The warrior started, but the man moved too fast. In a blink, he closed the distance and struck the warrior with a powerful punch. The impact sent the Kordath flying into a wall. He didn't get up. The remaining Kordath, seeing their leader defeated, turned and ran. For a moment, silence filled the docking bay. Daniel pushed himself up, still wincing in pain. He looked at the man who had just saved them. "Okay," Daniel said, breathing hard. "Who are you?" The man blinked, his glowing blue eyes fading slightly. He looked at Daniel, confusion on his face. The ship's engines roared to life as Daniel piloted them away from the cargo vessel. Outside, the vast emptiness of space stretched in every direction. Their escape had been close, too close. Vela stood near the unconscious Kordath warrior they had dragged on board, making sure he wouldn't wake up. Meanwhile, Daniel turned to the man they had rescued. He sat on the floor, his back against the wall, staring at his hands. His expression was distant, confused. Daniel crouched in front of him. "All right, let's start simple. What's your name?" The man looked up, his glowing blue eyes dimming slightly. "I don't know." Daniel sighed. "Of course you don't." Vela walked over, arms crossed. "The way you fought back there, your strength, your speed, that wasn't normal for a human." The man frowned. "I don't feel normal." He flexed his fingers as if testing them for the first time. "It's like I know how to fight, but I don't remember learning. I don't remember anything." Daniel and Vela exchanged glances. "Great," Daniel muttered. "Not only did we steal from the Kordath, but we stole something even they might not understand." Vela studied the man carefully. "You were in a stasis pod, hidden inside a secure container. That means the Kordath didn't kill you. They were keeping you for something." Daniel nodded. "And we need to find out what." The man looked down at his arms, then back at them. "I don't know who I am," he said again, "but I feel different, like I don't belong anywhere." Daniel leaned back. "Well, you're not alone in that." The ship's warning system suddenly beeped. A new signal had appeared on the radar. Vela rushed to the console. "A ship is approaching." Daniel turned to the screen. A sleek black vessel was closing in fast. The shape was unfamiliar, but the markings were clear. "Kordath. They're tracking us already," Daniel muttered. Vela's hands moved quickly over the controls. "They must have put a beacon on the cargo ship. We didn't escape as cleanly as we thought." The mysterious man stood up, his posture suddenly tense. "They're coming for me." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Not just you. All of us." The Kordath ship opened communication. The screen flickered, revealing the face of a Kordath officer with cold yellow eyes. "You have stolen from us," the officer said. "Surrender the human, and we may let you live." Daniel smirked. "Yeah, I'm gonna pass on that offer." The officer's expression remained calm. "Then you have chosen death." The transmission ended. Vela turned to Daniel. "They're charging weapons." Daniel gripped the controls. "Then so are we." The Kordath ship fired first. A blast of red energy streaked toward them. Daniel yanked the controls, sending their ship into a sharp dive. The energy bolt barely missed them, exploding into empty space. Vela fired back, sending two quick shots toward the enemy ship. One blast hit the shield, flashing blue upon impact. Daniel gritted his teeth. "We can't outgun them. We need to escape." The mysterious man stepped forward. "Let me help." Daniel glanced at him. "You know how to fight." "I don't remember learning," the man admitted, "but I know." Daniel didn't have time to argue. "Fine. Do what you can." The man rushed to the weapons console. His fingers moved with strange precision, pressing buttons like he had done this 100 times before. The ship's targeting system locked onto the Kordath vessel. Vela raised an eyebrow. You sure you don't remember anything? The man didn't answer. He fired. 2 precise shots hit the Kordath ship's engine, causing a small explosion. The enemy vessel spun out of control, its systems failing. Daniel saw his chance. He pushed the engines to full power, speeding away. The enemy ship disappeared into the distance. After a few moments, the radar was clear. Daniel exhaled. We're safe. For now. The mysterious man looked down at his hands again. I knew exactly what to do, he said quietly, but I still don't know why. Daniel studied him. There was more to this man than they had realized. And now, the Kordath weren't the only ones who wanted answers. Vela crossed her arms. We need to talk to Orcs. He sent us on this job. He must know something. Daniel nodded. Agreed. Let's go back and get some answers. The ship turned, heading toward their next destination. And as they flew through the darkness of space, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something much bigger than any of them had expected. The ship moved through the darkness of space, its engines humming steadily. Daniel kept his hands on the controls, eyes focused on the navigation screen. Their destination, an old space station floating near a dead moon. Vela stood near the weapons console, watching the radar carefully. The Kordath had already tracked them once. They couldn't afford another surprise attack. The mysterious man, still without a name, sat in a corner, deep in thought. He had barely spoken since their escape. Daniel glanced at him. You doing okay? The man looked up. I don't know. He clenched his fists. I feel like something is missing. Like there's a wall in my mind, blocking the truth. Vela crossed her arms. Maybe Orcs can help with that. Daniel nodded. Let's hope so. Orcs was an information broker, a man who traded in secrets. He had given them this job, claiming the cargo was valuable. But he hadn't mentioned anything about a human in stasis. Now, they needed answers. The space station came into view. It was old, rusted, barely functional, but perfect place for someone like Orcs to operate. Daniel activated the comms. Orcs, it's us. Open the dock. A few moments later, a crackling voice responded. You're late. We ran into trouble. A pause. Then, the docking lights turned on. Come in. Daniel guided the ship toward the station and landed smoothly. The docking bay was dimly lit, filled with crates and old machinery. As the ramp lowered, the group stepped out. Orcs stood waiting. He was an older man, thin, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Daniel, he said, looking at him, then at Vela. You brought trouble with you. Vela smirked. That's normal for us. Orcs' gaze landed on the mysterious man. His expression changed. I see you found the cargo. Daniel narrowed his eyes. You knew what was inside that pod, didn't you? Orcs didn't answer immediately. Instead, he motioned for them to follow. Come inside. We need to talk. They walked through the station's narrow halls until they reached a small room filled with old monitors and data pads. Orcs sat down and gestured for them to do the same. Daniel leaned forward. Start talking. Orcs. Who is he? Orcs sighed. His name is Adrian. The man blinked. Adrian. The name felt strange on his tongue. It didn't bring back any memories. Orcs nodded. You were part of a secret project. The Kordath didn't just capture you. They made you. Silence filled the room. Daniel frowned. Made him. Orcs tapped on a screen, bringing up old files. The Kordath have been experimenting with human DNA. They wanted to create a soldier, a warrior with human instincts, but enhanced beyond normal limits. Vela crossed her arms, and they succeeded. Orcs looked at Adrian. You were their best creation. Strong, fast, intelligent. But something went wrong. You rebelled. Adrian's hands clenched. I don't remember. You wouldn't, Orcs said. The Kordath erased your memories before putting you in stasis. They were planning to restart your training, make you loyal again. Daniel shook his head. So you sent us to steal him? Orcs smirked. I sent you to steal the cargo. I didn't think you'd actually open it. Vela glared at him. You could have warned us. Orcs leaned back. Would you have taken the job if you knew? Daniel sighed. Probably not. Adrian stood up. His breathing was heavy, his fists tight. I was their experiment. His voice was filled with anger and confusion. Orcs nodded. Yes, but now you're free. Adrian shook his head. No, I don't even know who I am. Daniel stood as well. Then let's figure it out together. Vela placed a hand on her weapon. And while we're at it, we should prepare. The Kordath won't stop hunting him. Orcs smirked. You're right. In fact, he turned a screen toward them. The radar showed an approaching ship. Daniel's stomach sank. They're here. The alarms in the station blared. The Kordath had found them. Adrian took a deep breath. Something inside him stirred. His instincts were returning. He looked at Daniel and Vela. I'm done running. Daniel grinned. Good. Then let's fight. The alarms blared through the station, red lights flashing as Daniel, Vela, and Adrian stood near Orcs' control room. The Kordath had found them, and they weren't coming for negotiations. Daniel checked his blaster. How many ships? Orcs tapped a few keys on his console. One, but fully armed. They're sending in a strike team. Vela cursed under her breath. They're not taking any chances. Adrian clenched his fists. His memories were still missing, but his instincts were sharp. We stopped them here. Daniel grinned. That's the spirit. Orcs sighed. You know, running is still an option. Daniel shook his head. Not this time. Orcs smirked. Didn't think so. He pulled a hidden blaster from under his desk. Then let's give them a warm welcome. The station's metal walls shook as the Kordath ship docked. Seconds later, the sound of boots hitting the floor echoed through the halls. They're inside, Vela muttered, gripping her rifle. Adrian's heart pounded. He didn't remember his past, but one thing was clear. He hated the Kordath. Daniel motioned toward the hallway. We hold them at the entrance. Don't let them spread out. They moved quickly, taking cover behind crates and old machinery. The door at the far end of the corridor hissed open. A group of Kordath soldiers in dark armor stepped inside, weapons raised. Daniel fired first. His blaster shot hit one of them in the chest, sending him crashing to the floor. The room exploded into chaos. Vela took down another soldier with precise shots, while Orcs covered the flank. Adrian didn't have a weapon, but he didn't need one. His body moved on its own, instincts taking over. He leaped forward, dodging energy blasts, and slammed into the nearest soldier. His fist hit like a hammer, sending the Kordath warrior flying. Another soldier aimed at him, but Adrian was faster. He grabbed the rifle, twisting it out of the enemy's hands before knocking him unconscious with a single strike. Daniel whistled. Remind me never to fight you. Adrian barely heard him. His mind was focused. Every move felt natural, as if he had trained for this moment his entire life. More Kordath soldiers pushed in, their leader stepping forward. He was taller than the others, his armor marked with golden stripes. I knew you'd be trouble, the leader growled, looking directly at Adrian. You should have stayed asleep. Adrian's fists tightened. Not anymore. The leader smirked. Then let me put you down myself. He lunged, swinging a plasma blade toward Adrian's chest. Adrian ducked, moving with inhuman speed. He grabbed a fallen rifle and fired point blank. The blast hit the leader's armor, making him stumble. But he didn't fall. The leader recovered quickly, slashing again. This time, Adrian caught the blade with his bare hand. The energy burned his skin, but he didn't let go. With a fierce growl, Adrian twisted the weapon out of the leader's grip and struck him with the hilt. The Kordath commander staggered back. Daniel and Vele used the distraction to finish off the remaining soldiers. The leader, bleeding but still standing, glared at Adrian. "You don't understand what you are." Adrian stepped closer. "Then tell me." The leader smirked. "You're our creation. You can't escape that." Adrian didn't hesitate. He delivered one final punch, knocking the commander unconscious. Silence filled the corridor. The fight was over. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. "Well, that was fun." Orcs chuckled. "You have a strange definition of fun." Vela kicked a fallen blaster away from the unconscious soldiers. "This won't be the last time they come after us." Adrian exhaled, looking down at his hands. He had won, but the leader's words stayed with him. Daniel clapped a hand on his shoulder. "You're not theirs anymore, Adrian. You're you." Adrian nodded slowly. He didn't have his memories, but he had something better. A future he could choose for himself. Orcs sighed. "All right, heroes. Time to leave before reinforcements arrive." They rushed back to their ship. As they lifted off, leaving the damaged station behind, Adrian stared out into space. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. He was finally free. The end.